Hello, everyone. Welcome to this year's British Journalism Review Charles Wheeler Award, hosted by the University of Westminster. I'm Steve Barnett. I'm a journalism and media prof at the university, and I'm on the editorial board of the BJR. In a moment, I'm going to hand over to the Vice-Chancellor for a formal welcome and introduction to the event, but first a couple of Zoom housekeeping announcements that you'll all be familiar with by now in the world of virtual events. You're all, I hope, currently muted. We'd ask you please to keep yourselves muted throughout. There'll be an opportunity to put questions to our speaker later on, both in chat and in person if you're on camera and presentable. We know that Zoom tolerance is getting ever shorter, so we expect to be finished around 7:15, 7:20. We're recording the event. The link will be sent to everyone who signed up on Eventbrite, and it'll be available on the university website. Finally, please bear with us if there are any glitches or internet dropouts. Apologies for keeping you waiting a bit longer than we wanted in the waiting room. As ever, we're all at the mercy of our internet service providers. We will be showing 2 short films during the course of the event. If there are any issues with video quality, then you will be able to see the clean, unadulterated versions on the recording. That's all the housekeeping. I'm now going to hand over to the University Vice-Chancellor, Peter Bomfield, to introduce the event.
Great. Thank you very much, Steve. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yeah, great. So, well, good evening, everyone. It's really super so many of you joined us this evening for this very, very auspicious event. This is the 12th Charles Wheeler Award, and we've been very proud to host it since its inauguration in 2009. Over the years, it's grown in popularity and recognition and is now established as one of the blue ribbon events of the Journalism Awards calendar. Past winners have included some of the most celebrated TV and radio journalists of our time, including George Alagaya, Lindsay Hilson, Jon Snow, and last year, Cathy Adler. We're delighted to welcome some of our past winners back this evening, as well as many other eminent journalists watching both here and outside the UK, which is one of the redeeming features, I guess, of having to hold these events online. We're also delighted to be hosting, as our guest speaker, one of the most distinguished names in British broadcasting, Sir Peter Bazalgette. We're also pleased to be collaborating with and supporting the British Journalism Review. We've been associated with this journal since its founding edition in 1989, and its mission is exactly what we aspire to achieve within our own journalism teaching: to connect scholars with journalism practitioners to promote ethical values in journalism and to reflect on an industry which we all agree is fundamental to a vibrant democracy. If ever there is evidence needed for the importance of reliable, accessible and trustworthy journalism to keep people properly informed, it's been the dreadful events of the last 12 months or so. We give a particular welcome, and we particularly welcome our association with an event that celebrates the memory and achievements of one of Britain's most celebrated broadcast journalists, Charles Wheeler. We were particularly sad to hear of the death in March this year of Lady Wheeler, who until recently presented the award herself and has always been a staunch supporter of the event. We remember her with enormous fondness and extend our sympathy to their daughters, Marina and Shireen. We're delighted they're both with us today, as they have been every year, to hand over the award. Thanks to all those who work so hard to make it happen within the university, the School of Media and Communications, and the British Journalism Review. I look forward to hearing from the winner and from our eminent speaker after the award. I'll now hand over to Julia Langdon, Chair of the BJR, to introduce the award. Have a good evening.
Thank you, Vice-Chancellor. Thank you for your warm welcome, and thank you all of you who are all here for coming. We too regard this as a very high-profile event for the British Journalism Review, and we are hugely appreciative of the extent to which the University of Westminster supports us. Steve Barnett has been terrific in getting this event on air tonight, and we thank him very much indeed for his terrific work. He is greatly valued a founding member of the board. The Charles Wheeler Award is, as you know, for an outstanding contributor to broadcast journalism. Some of the most leading names of our time have won in the years that we've been presenting it, in memory of Sir Charles Wheeler, who died obviously just before the award was started, and who we felt had to be commemorated as perhaps one of the best known broadcasters Britain has produced. The quality of his journalism was seen at home and abroad, and it is that mark of the admiration he won that we have tried to mirror in subsequent years with the awards that we have presented to a succession of distinguished journalists. We're very glad that Shireen and Marina are with us tonight, and other members of the Wheeler family. And the BJR is also very sorry about your loss this year of Lady Wheeler, whose absence is very much marked by us all. I thanked you, the audience. It's particularly good of you to turn up, I was going to say, because University of Westminster has been famed for giving us a decent drinks party, and you don't get any drinks on digital, so that's a shame. But I've got a few more other thanks to give. One to Kate Macmillan, our esteemed and wonderful events coordinator. None of us would be here without her. She manages to keep her sense of humour, her calm and her cool in all circumstances. And the other person to thank for us being here is Daniel Scroggins of the University's School of Design, Creative and Digital Industries. Daniel has been superb in getting this event to air. Thank you both. Now then, about the BJR. We're in the 31st year of publication. We believe in the excellence in journalism, which is what we're all here about tonight. We've had 3 excellent editors. Geoffrey Goodman, who founded the magazine 31 years ago. He was succeeded by Bill Haggerty, who's now our emeritus chair, and our current editor is Kim Fletcher. They've all managed to put together a very resourceful magazine, well written and at the cutting edge of journalism, we like to think, useful to students as well as to practitioners in the industry, and reflecting our life and times, as indeed does the Charles Wheeler Award. Kim, I think, has been particularly brilliant in producing a beautifully written magazine during his years of editorship. It's done with a lot of hard work, very little money, but a great deal of help. And here, the next lot I want to thank are you, the other members of the editorial board of the BJR, who are all volunteers and give up their time happily to help put the magazine together and to give Kim ideas, contacts, and resources for putting it into air. Our publishers are Sage, and I'd like to thank James Skelding Tattle for the very generous support we get from them, from him and his team. We couldn't do it without them, and we're sorry they're not actually able to be with us tonight, but I will pass on my broadcast thanks. Perhaps I should make clear that Sage in this context is not the Sage we've heard such a lot about from our winner, which, as we all now know, is the Scientific Advisory Group for Emergencies. It may amount to that in terms of keeping the BJR on the tracks, but Sage Publishing has been in existence for a very long time. So that brings us to our winner, brings me to our winner for this year, who came into journalism after studying a PPE at Christ Church, Oxford. And that is perhaps another phrase he never expected would resound so much in his career subsequently. the PPE, as we all know, stands for Politics, Philosophy and Economics. And our winner's career in journalism has been marked by both politics and economics. He has worked for a number of our leading broadcasters. Now, where's my list? Channel 4, ITN, Sky, as well as the BBC. However, PPE indeed, but did he ever expect to have to wear it as well as to study it? We've heard from him on politics and economics before he was made health editor of the BBC in 2014. Perhaps as a result of all he has been working on in the last year, in the future sometime when these dreadful days are done and we have returned maybe not to normal, but to another way of life and have a period of reflection, perhaps then our winner might be able to give us some philosophical view of what has occurred. Because although it's a little known fact that our winner is very privately, he's a private and modest man, an elder in the Church of Scotland, he does philosophy. He's written 3 books on 2 subjects in a very busy life, but I think we would all value in years to come and his analysis of what it has been like behind the scenes reporting on the events that he has had to do. He has been the public face, as we all know, for the BBC, and he has helped us all to understand. I'd now like you to look at a film about his work to give you an idea of why he is our winner.
So this is a COVID area now. So they're attached to a ventilator through a tube that's going through their mouth into their lungs. And those patients require one-to-one nurse-patient ratios. So we've got a nurse or a physiotherapist by the bed space looking after every patient.
There's always a nurse holding their hand, and we do the best we can.
Across the UK, up until the first week in May, just 3 under the age of 15 died with the virus. Between the age of 65 and 74, it was more than 6,300. And for 75-year-olds and over, more than 30,000 died with COVID-19.
The NHS is expanding the options for testing, including this drive-through facility. We were given the first look at how it works.
Laura here is a member of NHS staff. She's just going to demonstrate what actually happens. So she stays in the car, she winds down the window, and then 2 members of the nursing team will come out to meet her. One of them has got the full protective equipment on. Her colleague stands back at a safer distance. If I test positive for the virus, I'd be contacted by officials by phone or email and asked who I'd met up with in recent days. That might include, for example, friends I'd spent time with and work colleagues I might have been in meetings with, or a wider circle of recent contacts.
You're still not getting to 80% of those who've tested positive to find out their contacts. Doesn't that suggest you have got more work to do?
Well, as you just said, Hugh, the service is 6 weeks old, and we, as you can see, circa 75% of people who've tested positive we contact.
This was one of the first walk-in sites. The idea is you can come along without booking, and it's open 12 hours a day. The system's bosses have set themselves a major task, creating a network of centres like this in towns and cities around the country in time for winter, with all the pressures that'll bring.
So this is our intensive care unit that we have ready to use for the second surge of COVID.
At the peak, there were 20 patients in intensive care here, half with COVID. They've got room for more if needed. During the first surge, much of their focus was on the sickest COVID patients. But now, there are other worries as well.
Irrespective of COVID, hospitals like this are facing up to the build-up of the usual winter pressures. Here, they've seen some of their busiest ever days in the emergency department.
How close are you to having to cancel routine surgery and procedures because of COVID cases?
We are really close. Right now, I've got every operating theatre running.
I'll put the speaking
For those who question how stretched hospitals really are, today saw NHS leaders spelling out what they described as a serious situation, with the likelihood of continuing increases in coronavirus patient numbers. Hugh Pym, BBC News.
And our winner is, of course, Hugh Pym of the BBC. Now I'd like to hand over to Shireen and Marina Wheeler. Sorry, I can't hear. I should have allowed for the applause. So justly deserved. Now I'd like to hand over to Shireen and Marina Wheeler, who would be presenting the award to Hugh if he hadn't already collected it outside Highbury Tube Station on Saturday evening. Over to the Wheelers.
Thank you, Julia. And so we would, and we'd be taking great pleasure in presenting it to you, Hugh, and take great pleasure in saying congratulations and thank you so much, all of you, for organising this event. Hugh, may I say that your reporting at this time of crisis, really, is exactly what the audience has needed. You are reliable, you're calm in your delivery, you're accurate, you're independent in tone, and your reports are unadorned by spin. And in this sense, I feel that you're very much, although you aren't a foreign correspondent, of course, you're very much in the tradition of Charles, whose memory and standard of journalism we're celebrating tonight, as Steve and Peter reminded us. And we've done that every year since Charles died. If you'll allow me to digress for a moment, as you know, and as you've heard, Deep, our mother, died at the end of February. And for the last few years, she wasn't able to come to the event. But I do want to say to our friends at the University of Westminster and the British Journalism Review that she loved this event and the fact of the award in her beloved Charles's memory. So thank you for thinking of it. Thank you for looking after her so well when she presented the awards herself. If you allow Marina and I just a few minutes to remember her together, Deep was an intellectual powerhouse in her own right. She was our mentor, as well as Charles, who respected and admired her as well. The reading list of the books she gave me and Marina as teenagers speak both of her encouragement of us, but also her breadth of curiosity and interest. Doris Lessing, James Baldwin, Virginia Woolf, Nadia Mandelstam. And I honestly don't think that we'd be celebrating Charles today if it wasn't for my mother's support and encouragement of his career. And with that, I'll hand over to Marina, who probably has paid her one of the best tributes she could have done by writing her own book about her mother.
Thank you, and good evening, everyone. I'm delighted to endorse and echo everything that Shireen has said and extend my own warm congratulations to Hugh for being the winner of this year's award. Hugh and Charles are both recognised and accomplished broadcast journalists, stars of the screen, you could say. But Deep, on the other hand, was an unrecognised star of the screen. And I discovered this while writing the book that Shireen has referred to, that I'm going to shamelessly hold up here, The Lost Homestead. The full story is in the book, and I'm just going to give you an incredibly brief, abridged version of it. Deep in the late 1950s was the social secretary at the Canadian High Commission in Delhi, which is where she met our father Charles, as he was posted there as the South Asia correspondent for the BBC. In 1960, Deep was volunteered to be an interpreter for a Canadian TV crew that had arrived in India to do a documentary about the foreign aid that was being sent there. And after the film, the documentary, was screened in Canada, a producer wrote her a letter saying that it had been a great success, that she herself was exquisite, and that they had thought about rejigging the film around her. Now, I'd seen that letter, but never the film until last year. And the film, which we dug up, is absolutely brilliant. And she is absolutely brilliant. And so at the very end of this whole event, we're going to show you a snippet of it, a 5-minute snippet, leaving you to muse over the missed talent that was Deep Singh. So now, though, let's meanwhile, while waiting for that, return to the man of today, to Hugh. And again, our congratulations, Hugh, for being the winner.
Very well done.
Well, thank you very much indeed for that. Those words, Marina and Shireen. I'm very moved, actually, particularly to hear the tribute to your late mother, and would echo Julia's words and say how sorry we all are she's not with us, and our thoughts are with you, and we look forward to hearing more later, as you said. I must say, just to say a few words about your late father, Charles Wheeler. He really was an inspirational figure to generations of aspiring TV journalists, including me, with his authority, his ability to convey so vividly the stories he was covering, particularly in the US, I remember. And I was just talking to a colleague here at the BBC today who said he really had the ability intellectually to grasp what was happening, but was a master of storytelling. And that is so important. I think there was a time when the BBC and other broadcasters, as a reporter, you handed your script in and an editor would have to somehow put it together with words and pictures. But he was ahead of his time in knowing when words were less important than pictures and sound, and getting that unique mix. And I think it is undoubtedly the case. He laid the foundations for modern TV journalism. And a lot of what we aspire to is the sort of pieces that he did. And to be mentioned in the same breath of him is very humbling. So that was, a really important part of my career development, watching the work that Charles did. And I'm certainly very humbled to receive this award. When Julia got in touch, I nearly fell off my chair, certainly seeing the list of the previous winners and how much more deserving they were. But it has been an extraordinary year. I think Julia maybe it's time to sort of look again in a year's time, look at the philosophy of the whole thing. You don't want too much philosophy from me tonight. I did like the line about PPE, actually. That was very, very well chosen. It's been a difficult time in so many ways, and I think the BBC has been caught in a situation where, as often is the case, there can be polarized views, that there are views that we were scaremongering at various times, other views that we were too close to what the government was saying, we weren't challenging it enough or uncovering real stories. So we've had to live through that, and it hasn't always been easy covering it, but we've done our best. And I would say, though, that the challenge that we face has been nothing compared to what NHS and care staff have had to go through. And seeing some of those pictures and just remembering meeting patients in intensive care and seeing some of what they'd gone through, some of them with no underlying health conditions, 50s, 60s, 40s. This is a very nasty virus that can hit people in different ways and be with them for a long time. For those who say it's just about those with underlying health conditions who are older. And I can pay tribute really to them, those staff and the patients and families who've lived through this. And I've really got to thank so many colleagues from the BBC. I won't run through them all, but I think one particularly important part of the BBC's coverage, which I've benefited from as an on-air editor, is the research, the data journalism, going through the endless material that comes out about this new virus, and analysis of different figures, research, keeping up with it all. And there's a very dedicated team here. And I think if public service broadcasting has the value that we all know it does, it's in some of that unseen work that I can only say I take my hat off to, and I've benefited from hugely. I've worked with some wonderful colleagues. Most of that material was shot by a brilliant camera woman, Harriet Bradshaw, who went into difficult places, working in PPE with long hours and carrying all the equipment, and then editing the pieces brilliantly. One of the BBC's best producers, Dom Hurst, has been fantastic. Also Simon Hamer and Bernie Kitterick and others. So I think, as I alluded to talking about Charles earlier, the reporter is really only one bit of it. It is a fantastic team effort, TV News. And I think we would all celebrate that tonight, that it's being part of a team that makes it so special, particularly editors who put pieces together, the editorial leaders who under pressure have to work out running orders and priorities and what stories we go with, and supporting those of us in the field. And I'd like to thank my wife, Susan, very much, who has put up with a lot of my absences over lockdown and been very supportive. She's watching tonight. And our son and daughter who lived with us throughout lockdown certainly were fantastic supporters and also constructive critics in the best possible way. And our other son who was not with us, but equally so. And certainly a big thanks to Steve and to Julia for getting in touch, facilitating all this, chasing me up, make sure that I had all the right information. I'm sorry I was a bit late in the day, but certainly that meeting at Highbury in Islington, Steve, on Saturday worked very well. And a big thanks to Kate as well for organising the event, and to the British Journalism Review and the University of Westminster. So it is with great pleasure and considerably humbled and honoured that I can say that I gratefully accept the Charles Wheeler Award 2020, and as if by magic, drum roll, I don't know if there's a virtual drum roll out there, but here it is. Thank you very much indeed, everybody, and thank you for watching and listening and your support. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much, Hugh. I'm only sorry that we can't all be there in person, but maybe actually if we are all back next year, you can come and show it off again in front of everyone. Yes, that particular handover at Highbury Station, it did occur to me that I handed over this brown box to this guy with a suitcase who then wheeled it off. I can imagine people wondering whether there was some drugs heist going on. Anyway, can I add my congratulations to everyone else's? I have to say, in a world where clear and accurate and easily digestible information has never been more important, your reporting, Hugh, has been an object lesson in broadcast journalism at its best. And I think we all we take your point about the best TV journalism being teamwork. Absolutely right. So now it's up to me to introduce our speaker. He started his media career as a BBC News trainee at a time when it was almost impossible to get on the scheme, as I can testify personally. He founded his own TV production company, Basil, where he created a number of hits, including Ready Steady Cook, Changing Rooms and Ground Force. He then became chairman of Endemol, where he was responsible for a series of entertainment hits. So you'll remember Big Brother and Deal or No Deal, which earned worldwide success. And for his trouble in spearheading some of the most popular TV formats of the time, he was then named by the Daily Mail as one of the 10 worst Britons of the time. And I'm sure he's never looked back since. He was chairman of the Arts Council England from 2013 to 2017, chaired both the Holocaust Memorial Foundation and English National Opera, and has fellowships from BAFTA and the RTS. He's been chairman of ITV since May 2016 and one of the most influential voices in British broadcasting. And frankly, in any sane world, he would be an obvious candidate for the next chairman of the BBC. So I'm delighted to welcome Sir Peter Puzzlejet as this year's speaker. Before I hand over, can I remind everyone that we are taking questions at the end. So please feel free to write questions or comments in the chat function thanks to the wonders of modern technology. I'm trying to keep an eye on it as we go. And I'll either read them out, or ideally I will call on the questioner to ask the question themselves. So Baz, you'll have to imagine the thunderous applause that would certainly have greeted your arrival in the auditorium, but over to you.
Thanks, thanks very much, Steve. And oh, there we are. That was my single fan. That was my single fan applauding. Thanks very much, Steve, and good evening, everyone. Let me add my congratulations to Hugh. I'm gratified that before his distinguished career at the BBC, he also worked at ITV News. As chair of ITV, I can say, without a scintilla of bias, that Hugh has served both our presenters, premier news channels, organisations very, very well indeed. And of course, that news output is the jewel in the crown of our public service broadcasting system, which Hugh has just alluded to. And it's PSB I want to talk about tonight. This is topical. We have an Ofcom review into PSB. We have a DCMS review, plus a panel no less. And these are timely because in the 2020s, we first have to sort the commercial licenses of ITV, Channel 4 and Channel 5. Then shortly after that, a bit like painting the Forth Road Bridge, we need to address the BBC's charter again. I'm going to argue that up to now, our debate about PSB has not been good enough. We prefer old certainties to new realities. Sometimes when I hear the deliberations of the commentariat, it's as though we're talking about preserving some formerly cherished piece of heritage, like trying to save a venerable stately home. This evening, you'll hear me make a forceful argument for PSB, but solely in terms of how it meets the challenges of the 21st century. That's the debate we should now be having. So, for the avoidance of doubt, as our legal friends put it, what is PSB? Well, it's a contract with broadcasters to deliver a public good. What's that public good? Well, that's best defined by its key elements: democratic, cultural, economic. Let's just unpack those a bit. Democratic, the well-resourced provision of trusted and reliable news produced by trained and ethical journalists. A functioning democracy depends on an informed citizenry. Cultural, that's cultural in its broadest sense: identity, shared values, our national conversation. This comes from programs made by us, about us, and for us. And then economic. Our screen industries are a cornerstone of our fast-growing creative industries. The PSB companies have a special role here. They're required to be investors in nations and regions outside the Southeast and support independent production. They also nurture new talent. Well, this much we all know, but we now need to reinterpret these qualities to match the age we're living in. An industrial revolution more dramatic than that of the 19th century, and one that's disrupting our democracy, our culture, and our economy. Even the name public service broadcasting seems otiose, doesn't it? Why would you define it by its method of distribution? And how relevant is that word broadcast anyway, when much of what we watch is now narrowcast, one-to-one? The best replacement I've come up with so far is critical social content, or CSC. You can probably do better, but we do need a bit of a rebrand here. So, a reinterpretation for the times we live in. I think there are 5 compelling contemporary reasons for nurturing critical social content for the benefit of indeed our society. Of course, they come out of the key elements I've just talked about. They're trusted and reliable news, content that promotes and develops our shared values, national resilience, the furthering of the creative industries, and the nurturing of Britain's soft power abroad. Appropriately for this event, which commemorates, as we've heard, a great journalist, the most important of these is news, and I'm going to spend more time on it than the others. We were just 20 years into the internet age. We're still discovering what it means. It's brought us many benefits: new industries, untold access to data and information, connections to people we'd never have otherwise met, a cornucopia of entertainment, and so on. But it also represents a threat to civil society. It's a promoted anarchy. It's the home of rumour, gossip and paranoia. The handful of supranational monopolies which dominate our access to the web rely on algorithms which connect us to what they think we'll like or agree with. This has made confirmation bias into a sort of religion. I ask you, in the midst of this Tower of Babel, are a group of trained journalists charged with making impartial news, featuring a broad range of ideas and opinions, more or less relevant than they were before? Television radio news may not be perfect, or indeed perfectly impartial, but it does strain every sinew to deliver high quality national and regional news according to those standards. And it's held to account for it by Ofcom. Beyond the PSB services, Sky News performs a valuable role as well. Indeed, I'd argue one begat the other. This is different to newspapers, which play a valid and largely responsible role by also investing in journalism, but presenting a spectrum of slants for us to choose from. Their business models, of course, are rather more challenged than those of television at the moment. I read some are now questioning whether we should still enshrine impartial news in our system. It's healthy to challenge, of course, but let me answer the point tonight with a morality tale from across the water. Like many of you, I've been following the US election very closely. It's a country, of course, that Charles Wheeler sent many memorable dispatches from. I've been consuming acres of US media this month, and I have to say, I am extremely alarmed. First, of course, we're well aware how the excesses of Fox News helped create the Trump phenomenon in the first place, how it fed tropes about George Soros and Barack Hussein Obama, how it helped make millions of people angry. And I've been somewhat shocked coming back to CNN recently, how polemical it's also become as an anti-Trump channel. Witness its anchor, Anderson Cooper, dubbing Trump and his baseless allegations of electoral fraud as, quotes, an obese turtle on its back flailing in the sun. That was in their actual election coverage. When Fox News, the part still presented, that is, by functioning journalists rather than the shock jocks you get in the evening, when it decided to cut away from a Trump speech, falsely claiming victory, it was rewarded by street demonstrations with placards denouncing it as Fox News fake news. In this looking-glass world, this was when Fox actually tried to tell the truth. Now let's remember, just for the record, that the US government's own Department of Homeland Security declared on Thursday that the election was the most secure ever and that there was no evidence that any voting systems were compromised. And we know what's at stake here. Destroy confidence in a democracy and you wound it forever. But then, TV is not where the real problems are coming from. It's our old friend, the internet. This was the election when a congresswoman was elected who openly espoused the QAnon conspiracy. This is, of course, Marjorie Taylor Greene in Georgia. This idea of a satanic cult of pedophiles in Washington mobilizing against, originally from the basement of a pizzeria, is the malignant progeny of Twitter, Facebook, and Google's YouTube. These social media platforms may have belatedly, and not very effectively, started trying to qualify this terrible stuff, but there it still is for all to see, and more, much more recently. It's also on Facebook that Carl Higbie has released a Newsmax video debunking the election result with a litany of false claims. It's on YouTube that the One American News Network declared a Trump victory. It's on Twitter that Trump is keeping up his daily drumbeat of lies. The latest this weekend was a false conspiracy theory about voting machines, first floated by, of course, QAnon. These are just 3 recent examples. It goes on and on. The platforms may have tried to label some of this stuff, but they still distributed it, all in the last few days. On CBS last night, Barack Obama called it truth decay. But now, as the big internet players start to behave as publishers, rather than the no responsibility distributors they always claimed they were, the really toxic stuff is moving to other unmediated internet players. Parler, and Rumble have gained millions of followers in the past 2 weeks. They've created a world in which Trump won, and probably, who knows, becomes president for life. Now, we can't ignore it. Surveys last week indicated that 20% of the US population believe Trump really did win. That's tens of millions of citizens. And as liberal democracies rightly move to try to regulate the internet, we have to hope they're going to be good at whack-a-mole. Which brings me back to the critical social content of public service, impartial news. Peddling lies and alternative facts is cheap. Verifying and reporting actual facts is expensive. But more than ever, there has to be a gold standard of trust and reliability. News programs and online sites to which anyone can go because they know they'll find facts checked dispassionately. This is why we're currently promoting ITV News on air as filtered for no one. Now, it's not Russia or China I've just been talking about. It's not Hungary, Poland or Turkey, though we should be worried about all of them. It's the United States of America. The internet age has placed us on a precipice, and we had better shore up the essential foundations of our democracy. So I said I had 5 contemporary justifications for a PSB system in the 21st century, and news was the first. The second is content, which is made by us, for us, and about us. Today we're blessed with the likes of Netflix, Amazon Prime and Disney Plus, offering a wonderful range of streamed entertainment. Most of it is international and none the worse for that. Severed bodies on Scandi bridges, drugs production in the New Mexico desert, and alcoholic chess prodigies certainly have their place. But our current PSB system funds £2.6 billion of UK original production a year. It's the news, it's the documentaries and reality shows, and it's the soap operas. If I just think of ITV's 2 soaps, you'll find storylines about sexual grooming, miscarriage, Muslim homosexuality, gay adoption, multiple sclerosis. That's just in Coronation Street. And there are plots about dementia, breast cancer, Down syndrome abortion, child abuse in the family, acid attacks. That's all in Emmerdale. This domestic content is one of the ways through which we explore who we are as a nation. Likewise, this has been the year of Black Lives Matter, when we've all been confronted with systemic inequalities. I thought the way in which all the PSB channels covered Black History Month in new challenging ways this year was another example of the cultural power of that 2.6 billion investment. It doesn't mean that identity-defining shows are the exclusive preserve of PSBs, not at all. Witness the growing portfolio of great series from Sky. But the PSBs form a bedrock in so many ways. The other day, I asked Amazon's Alexa to play some Chopin. Her deathless reply was, "What sort of shopping channel would you like?" I want a future in which I can find Chopin as well as shopping channels. My third point is national resilience. We've all faced an emergency this year, our greatest since the Second World War. And I think, by the way, that Hugh Pym's vivid showreel reminded us just how much that emergency has dominated our lives this year. We've relied more than ever on our most popular TV channels to both communicate key COVID public service messages to mass audiences, and quite properly, to scrutinise the government performance as well. And as Hugh said just now, the critics from both sides of this argument will never be perfectly satisfied, but it's good that we have that argument, and it's good that Hugh is aware of the pressures from both sides. I think it keeps us all honest. But this is not just about the message, it's also about the medium. It may well be that most of TV is distributed by the internet within a decade, but we'd be well advised to maintain other means of distribution, such as the DTT system that many Britons still rely on for their television signal. We've always been told that the next world war in future will be a nuclear one. I beg to differ. The next world war will be a digital one, and arguably it's already started. You no doubt saw the GCHQ report last week that Russia is currently trying to seed anti-vax sentiments online here in the UK. If the internet is ever seriously compromised, we'll still need another means of distribution and content on it, which has a defined national responsibility. Next, I mentioned the PSB role in growing the creative industries. I wrote a report on this fast-growing sector for the government. The prediction was that it'll create at least 1 million new jobs by the next decade. The knowledge economy is going to be critical to our future prosperity, and the screen industry is an important part of that. But we need this growth to benefit the whole country. The BBC has made major investments in Greater Manchester, Cardiff, Glasgow and Bristol. ITV maintains thriving production centres in the North West and Yorkshire, amongst others. Channel 4 has co-located to Leeds. This is another aspect of the delivery of public value, and public value for all right across the country. So we've got trusted news, our national conversation, resilience and economic growth across the nations and regions. My fifth and last point is soft power. We're on the threshold of leaving the EU. We've never needed more trading partners around the world than we do now. And where culture goes, trade often follows. I learnt this powerful lesson when I chaired Arts Council England. Our broadcasters and the independent producers which supply them have trebled Britain's programme exports in the last 15 years. We have a deserved reputation for creativity. This is allied to our happy possession of the English language. The PSB output of original content will be one of the most powerful ambassadors we have going forward. One final point on this. Have you listened to the BBC World Service recently? If not, do so. It's magnificent, and it broadcasts our best ideas and values to the world 24 hours a day. These are the compelling contemporary arguments for PSB, or critical social content as I prefer to call it. Of course we need a debate about making this system fit for the current century. Again, I've heard would-be revolutionaries talk about starting from a clean slate. Really? Every country in the world is facing the same challenges for the internet, one of which is sustaining what we might term local content for local people. Britain has a head start because we still have strong local institutions. None is immune to reform, but please spare me your tabula rasas. Something we do need to consider, however, are two existential threats these institutions face. First applies only to the BBC. To continue to do what it does, it needs hypothecated funding. By all means, debate its size and responsibilities. By all means, debate the method of funding, a licence fee, a household levy, general taxation, all possibilities. But without a dedicated funding stream, it will wither and die. The second existential issue is for all the PSB organisations, all of them. In the future, when, as I mentioned, the internet will represent the main means of TV distribution, this will take place via a small number of dominant foreign-owned platforms. They're already emerging. Amazon, Comcast Sky, Apple, as well as the connected TVs themselves. What will you find on their home screen in the future? How far will you have to dig and delve to find any mention of BBC iPlayer, ITV Hub, or all four? So it's critical that we have an update of the 2003 Communications Act. It established a simple principle of prominence for PSB channels. This now needs to be modernised to apply to all these dominant foreign platforms, the new gatekeepers. They should have to carry the PSB services, give them prominence, and pay fair value for all the viewers which they attract to their platforms. This really quite simple arrangement will provide the consideration for the commercial PSB companies to continue to invest in public value content, such as national and regional news. That's why I welcome the current PSB reviews I alluded to at the start. Let them be in no doubt as to what is at stake. Now, in conclusion, do you recall the American wag who said that television is a medium because it's neither rare nor well done? Well, I believe much of our television is very well done, and I think it's up to all of us to make sure it doesn't become rare. With that, I'd like to thank the trustees of the Charles Wheeler Award for allowing me this platform to talk about PSB, or CSC as I now like to call it. My congratulations once again to Hugh, and I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Terrific. Yes, more thunderous applause. Thanks. Thanks, Baz. Very good, and I can see lots of visual applause, even if we can't hear it all. We've had I'm lots and lots of tributes pouring into Hugh on chat, which is wonderful. But people have been so busy saying congratulations that they haven't put any questions to Baz. So there's one, and I'll ask them to put it in a minute. So while I'm asking a couple of questions, and we've had a couple which have been written in advance, which I will put to him. And okay, I've got another question. So let me just ask you one question, Baz, which is, you emphasize the need for impartiality, and I think your cautionary tale from the States is well taken. Certainly within commercial broadcasters, that is overseen and implemented by Ofcom. We've got two new news channels starting in the new year, GB News and supposedly one being launched by Rupert Murdoch, which we can assume will probably come from the right, or at least the right of centre. To what extent do you think that the impartiality regime is under threat? And to what extent do you think Ofcom is sufficiently well equipped institutionally to implement it?
Well, look, I don't think there's any obvious threat to the impartiality regime at the moment, but I wouldn't assume that won't be the case forever, which is why I think it's very important we all articulate it, support it, and understand it. Bear in mind the actions Ofcom took against, for instance, Russia Today and Iranian television. I've often speculated, you know, Fox News is not available on the Sky platform anymore. But given what Fox News puts out, I've often wondered whether Ofcom would have fined Fox News. That would have been a good test to illustrate, Steve, whether you think it's effective. But at the moment, they have a content board. It's got very good people on it, and I have no reason to suppose they can't do what they need to do. Just one more thing on your two new news channels. I think we should welcome new news channels. If they want to be on television, they've got to obey the rules that Ofcom oversees, which I'm sure they would. We wish them good fortune. Remember that one of them is entirely independent and has to raise the capital to execute its plan. My understanding is it's not done that yet. The other comes from the Times stable, and the great thing to remind ourselves of here is that all the news services are subsidised one way or another. Sky is subsidised by Sky and has a 10-year, Comcast has had to agree to maintain its funding for 10 years. ITV Channel 4, we subsidise our news with our entertainment programmes and the advertising they attract. The BBC has the licence fee. So I'd welcome a new channel, but it's a very tough challenge, because that's one of the things about independent, impartial news. It needs funding.
Okay, I'm following the chat and I'll take them in order. Simon Surtees has a question following on from what we've just discussed. Simon, are you on camera, on mute? Can we hear Simon? No.
It's a jolly nice photograph of his wedding.
It is.
My daughter's wedding, actually.
Okay, Simon, you go ahead.
Yeah. I once had the privilege of meeting Charles Wheeler, and we had about 20 minutes in his company after a BBC event with my daughter, who was studying American studies, so I wanted her to meet him. And we started to talk about Alistair Cook, because I was very interested in about talking about Alistair Cook with him. And I said to him, I wished Alistair Cook had come off the fence more in his journalism, and asked Charles Wheeler what he thought. And he said, yes, it's exactly what he thought. He kept saying to him, Alistair, come off the fence. And I wondered if you thought that effective journalism was better off the fence or on the fence, as I think actually the Conservative government would prefer the BBC to be.
Well, look, we talked about impartiality earlier, which is not the same as not having an opinion, or not giving an honest opinion. Look, I think the most important thing to say here about all the journalism that we admire and would like to sustain is balance or impartiality is not getting two people, one to say things are black and the other to say things are white. That is the enemy of understanding. Good, impartial journalism says, I am going to investigate fearlessly, without fear or favour, what this subject is about, much as you see Hugh do in many of his health broadcasts about the health system. And then possibly you can follow that with arguments for and against. But first investigate, first inquire, first scrutinise. And that is not being on the fence, that's doing your job as a journalist. So that would be my response.
Okay, Jonathan Hayward. Jonathan, if you can unmute and ask your question.
I am unmuted. Can you hear me, Steve?
Yep, loud and clear.
Hello, Peter. I'm very aware you're known as Baz, but it seems very informal to address you as Baz without ever having really been introduced. But if I may,
go ahead.
Okay, Baz. Okay, thank you. I thought that was a fantastic speech. Really interesting. I like your critical social content rubric. I guess my question is, looking at the very plural, diverse society that we now have, and also taking into account the fact that there seem to be serious, sorry, that's the dog making noises off, there seems to be market failures for that kind of critical social content in all parts of the media, whether it's local newspapers or investigative journalism. Is there not a case for saying that if there is to be some hypothecated funding, the bulk of which might well go to the BBC, that some of it should be available to other providers of high quality and, as you say, impartial news that perhaps comes from different parts of the UK, perhaps speaks to different audiences, some of whom may not have quite the same relationship with the BBC that the rest of us have?
So I think it's a perfectly good question while you review public service broadcasting to ask, whatever the hypothecated funding stream is, whether the BBC should have all of it. In fact, it doesn't have all of it at the moment, in the sense that a little bit of it goes to kids programmes via the BFI. And it doesn't have all of it at the moment in the sense that it actually shovels a good 40% back out to independent producers. So it's more plural than it's given credit for. But that's a perfectly fair question. I'll just issue one warning. I do regard the BBC as one of our greatest assets, both at home and abroad. And if you wanted to say it didn't get all the funding from in the future and other people could pitch to do bits, perfectly good idea, perfectly fair question. Don't make the BBC so small that effectively you're ending it. Not only is it important that it's a healthy organisation, it's also important because it has the power to convene, it has the power to train talent, it's got all sorts of things it can do because of its size. So I think your question, Jonathan, I see your dog disagreed with you, but I think your question is a fair one. But don't let the BBC die in death by 1,000 cuts.
Okay, Bria Scudamore has a very short question. Are you there? If not, I can ask it. I'm going to ask it. Can the licence fee survive this government?
Well,
can I just say, first of all, sorry,
there you are, sorry.
I was just trying to unmute myself unsuccessfully. First of all, Peter, hello, and I completely agree with you about your view on impartiality and actually what real impartiality is, which is extremely good investigative journalism or journalism which is then presented, maybe with a view, but from core research. And then my question, which as Steve said, is can the licence fee survive this government?
Yes, good question. Brian, it's very nice to see you, by the way. You look as though you're talking to us from the British Library, but maybe you're not.
It's a curtain.
Ah, very good, brilliant. What artifice? You wouldn't get away with that in independent, impartial journalism. I can assure you, we don't go for that sort of artifice. Look, can the licence fee survive? To be fair, I don't actually think that's the right question, if I may, Brian. I think the right question is, what is the best way of funding the BBC? And in an era of massive change, technical change, social change, digital change, it may be or may not be that the licence fee is the answer. So that's why I said, let the BBC have hypothecated funding, but let us have a proper debate for 3 or 4 years about the best way of getting that stream of funding to it. So perhaps if you meant, can the BBC's hypothecated funding survive the current government? Of course it will. Don't worry about all the sound and fury. Part of it just left Downing Street.
Okay, there's an optimistic sounding. Now, one of our former winners, Michael Crick, wants to ask a question. Michael, I know you're there somewhere, so do unmute and show us yourself.
I'm here.
Yeah, hi there. Yeah.
Peter, what do you make of all the stories about Martin Bashir and the way in which the 1995 famous Diana interview was obtained? And does it matter?
Well, look, the first thing is how we perform our journalism, how we get our stories, how we ask people to take part and persuade them so to do. Of course that matters. That's very, very important. If you'll forgive me, Michael, I believe there is some sort of investigation going on. Is that right? Although you obviously, as far as you're concerned, are utterly convinced as to what happened. I'm pleased that Tim Davie is investigating it. I hope that they will hear from Tim Souter and Tim Gardam, who did the original investigation, as well as Tony Hall, who was head of news at the time. And I hope when they conclude that investigation, they'll not only look at the specifics of whether that particular prop of a bank statement persuaded various participants to take part, but not just that, to your point, but whether it was the right thing to do anyway. Whether it did gain them the interview or not, was it the right thing to do? So, like you, I would like to have that question answered, so very clear on the ethics. I look forward to it.
Okay, thank you. Interesting question from Helen Owen. Helen, are you there?
Yeah, hi, I'm here. So I'm a governor at the university, so obviously I'm interested in young people. So my question is, and actually maybe also Hugh might be interested in answering this. If you were starting your career today as a news journalist, which organisation would you join on which continent?
Yes, well, one of the differences between now and the last century when I entered the jobs market is that there are far fewer possibilities to get a paid job as a journalist now. There's acres of digital space to fill, unpaid, but actually being paid and indeed being trained, that's really difficult now. So, I mean, I must say that I would go the same route of television or radio journalism because that is where there are some guaranteed training programs and guaranteed employment. So, you know, I might look to American broadcasters, I might look to British broadcasters, but trying to get into paid journalism, print journalism now, it's much, much more difficult. When I left university, we did our interviews at Thomson newspapers, the Daily Mirror Group, etc., etc. There was about 5 or 10 of them we traipsed around. They've all gone now. So I would definitely go the broadcast route simply out of a sense of self-preservation.
I agree. Very briefly, I agree, Peter. I mean, I would say BBC, of course, because of the quality and the investment in training by the management over successive decades, which is still there and is part of public service broadcasting. I think it's been a huge shame about the decline of local newspapers for reasons we all know, because that was a fantastic training ground. And independent. I started in independent local radio. We were always out to get the BBC and beat them. And I fear some of the journalism in independent local radio, I mean, it has declined for cost reasons, financial reasons. But so if something can be done to stimulate the grassroots, that would be great. But I'd always say start there in the UK and then take it from there. It's still a great career, but very much harder to start off in, as you say.
And Steve, if I might add something.
Absolutely take the point.
Steve, could I just add something? Could I just add something to what Hugh's just said? I'm very alarmed, as a lot of people are, that the collapse of the business model of local newspapers has meant that particularly local government, county council meetings, district council, city council meetings, courts and so on are not routinely covered, the essence of our functioning society and democracy, in the way they were when I started off. We know why. Local newspapers' business model was destroyed, you might say, in fair competition, you might not, by Google, which took their classified advertising, which is their main revenue stream, about 15 years ago, 10, 15 years ago. And more recently, Facebook came back for second dibs and took most of the banner advertising as well. So that's the reason. And I'm only making that point, Steve, because there's a lot of local newspapers who get at the BBC and say it's unfair that the BBC has an online iteration of its news services. Well, by all means make that point, and I know the BBC has separated some funds for local journalism, but that's not the point. The point is their model has been destroyed by the supranational monopolies that operate on the internet. That's the point.
Yeah, I have to say I absolutely agree. There are kind of moves afoot. Certainly there's a recent move. Jonathan was asking this question before. Chairs the Public Interest News Foundation, which is just, they've just been granted charitable status by the Charity Commission. So I think it will be a bit easier for small journalism enterprises to get some additional funding, but it's very, very tough for our students when they leave, definitely. Right, a couple of questions about the states which you raised, Baz, and then I think we'll wrap up, and we could go on for a long time, but I think Zoom fatigue will kick in if we're not careful. So Nick Radlow and then Ivor Gaber, one of my colleagues on the BJR committee, and then I think we'll wrap up. Nick, do you want to ask your question? Nick Radlow, are you there? I'll ask it. Does the US, as a short question, does the US need a properly funded equivalent of the BBC, given how diminished PBS has become over there?
Well, that's a really good question, but all I can say in answer is dream on. I mean, PBS is lucky to have survived the depredations of the last 20 or 30 years. With American society polarized, and anything that's state-funded, dubbed by 70 million of the electors socialism, and apparently that's a very bad thing, a dream on about funding any more what I would call state-funded or state-enabled impartial journalism. It won't happen. What I hope will happen is that with a calmer piece of leadership in future from the top in their politics, you can begin to heal the divided society. At the end of the day, once we've had the debate, to have a functioning society, we have to listen to each other, respect each other, and work with each other. And that is not happening over there at the moment.
Really interesting question, for a real kind of professional journalism question from Ivor, who's there. Yeah.
Hi, good evening. I can't see myself popping up on the screen, but I'm
You're
sure
there. You're there.
good,
Yep.
good.
Yep,
Peter, it was a really interesting, stimulating talk, and congratulations to Hugh, an old colleague, while I'm on air. But I had a very short, I want to maybe a devil's advocate question, wearing my old PSB hat and saying, tut, tut, tut. Do you approve of the American networks cutting away from the president? Do you approve of American anchors and reporters saying this is not true? Because in the old traditions of public service broadcasting, we would be dispassionate, dare I say objective, and we wouldn't interpose. Are you comfortable with this new trend?
Well, I have a really good question. I made clear in what I said that I myself are extremely uncomfortable to find CNN has become a polemical voice against Trump, just as Fox is a polemical voice in favor of Trump. So what we have to say here is that Trump has poisoned the well. He's poisoned the well of public discourse, and everybody's reacting to it. And that's the terrible thing. But whether I approve of Fox News cutting away, I don't know. You see, when Fox News cut away, it was one of the first times they tried to be honest. So what am I to say? What are any of us to say about the situation this extraordinary character in the White House has put us all in? It's quite unprecedented. Thank you, Steve.
Yeah, okay. Really interesting research from the Pew Research Center, which looked at trust in the US and on 30 different sources. and showed that essentially there are now 2 news tribes in the US, and that no one trusts, none of the 30 sources is trusted by more than half of all US adults, which is in stark contrast to the trust invested in all the broadcasters, I think, over here, not just the BBC. Baz, I've got to put one last question to you, which has come right at the end. Do you not? I'll put it to you. This is from David. Do you regret not being on the Culture Secretary's recently announced panel into public service broadcasting?
Well, I'm not sure whether the public service suppliers, such as ITV and BBC, should be on the panel. But perhaps you could argue there's a place for them on the panel if there's a place for Facebook. That's my answer.
That's exactly as I was about to say. If there is for Facebook, then I'd have thought, and the independent producers, of course. Okay, I think we'll draw. My apologies to those who had questions. As I say, I think we've all had enough of Zoom. We could go on for another half hour, but we all need a break from our computers. Baz, many thanks for a really important and stimulating keynote. Lots of questions there. Maybe the newly announced PSV panel and even a newly emollient number 10 will be taking note of some of the things you said. I'm not going to call for a rousing virtual ovation, but please do take it as read. As we said at the beginning, we're going to end with a brief film. Before winding up, can I add my thanks to Julia's, both to Daniel at the university and to Kate Macmillan, without either of whom none of this would have happened. We do want to end with a brief film tribute, as Marina said, to Marina and Shireen's mother, Deep Wheeler, who was a great supporter of the event. We've really appreciated her enthusiasm and support over the years. It's a very touching, very moving 5-minute film. So I would encourage you all to stay and watch. Many thanks for tuning in, and very much hope to see you all back in the Regent Street Cinema next year. Let's run the film.
Close Up, India, Revolution by Consent. A special 60-minute edition with Blair Fraser and Dip Singh. Your host, Frank Willis.
I'd like to ask him, first of all, whether he owns this card or whether he just drives it for somebody.
Yeah, आपका अपना टांगा है कि किसी और के लिए? He owns the Tonga.
What did he do before that?
पहले क्या करते थे आप?
पहले मैं मंत्री बजाऊं, फिल्म में.
He used to play the flute. क्या फिल्म में?
Advertising.
फिर छोड़ दिया? He was a model, apparently.
Does he consider that he has a better living now driving a Tonga than he did when he was working as a model?
Well, from what I gathered from his remark, he makes more money now, but he's not as happy.
These bullocks, better fed than most Indians, belong to the Ford Foundation. They drive a pump that was to make Kanpur a model village. Fraser talked with its headman, Narayan Singh.
What happened?
फिर क्या हुआ उन्होंने?
फिर उन्होंने यहाँ पर मशीन भेज दी.
The village people were very excited about this because they felt that they had done their modest bit, and the Ford Foundation people with their superior knowledge would be able to definitely improve on what they had done, and therefore they even agreed to the Ford Foundation demolishing their old community center and setting up a new improved one in its place.
And then, go on, this is very interesting.
फिर क्या हुआ?
फिर हमने समझा मगर जो हमारे बच्चे जो हैं ये भी सब सीखेंगे.
This is very interesting. He says that when the American technicians first came out, the villagers were skeptical about these people coming from a cold country being able to work in this hot area, but he says that they did a wonderful job.
Now, did all of the people welcome this, or was there division in the village about it?
कोई लोग ऐसे भी थे जो समझे कि ये उस वक्त के ये काम ठीक नहीं चलेगा?
ये तो सभी तरह के होते हैं बहुत से ऐसे भी है कि ये कहते थे कि भाई नहीं ये तो नहीं चलेगा काम.
He said, of course, there were some people who doubted the whole project from the beginning, and some of them were even afraid that these foreigners might lift up the land and take it away. But that was a very small minority, of course.
Well, that was at the beginning.
Yes.
What's the feeling now? How do the village people feel about the whole project now?
अब क्या लोगों के का ख्याल है कि
अब तो लोगों को ये ख्याल हो गया कि जमीन के लिए तो भाई पानी तो ये.
They're trying to form a society of their own. They've despaired of the promises made by the Ford Foundation. They're satisfied with the way the irrigation project is being carried on. But as far as the furniture factory and the brick plant is concerned, they feel that the Ford Foundation will not be able to do very much.
But what think the poor and the hungry? Back in Old Delhi, Fraser samples other opinions.
I'd just like to ask, first of all, how long she's been working today?
She starts at 5 in the morning and finishes at 10, and then again from 2 to 5. She works for the municipal committee.
Oh, I see. Sweeping the street?
Roads, yes.
So, has she got a family of children?
बच्चे हैं आपके? कितने हैं? 5. She's got 5 children.
And when does she look after them? Between 10 and 2?
बच्चों का कौन ध्यान रखता है? बच्चों को भगवान पालता. God takes care of the children.
Where does she live?
कहाँ रहती हो? मोरीगेट. मोरीगेट. नहीं ठीक है. क्यों बात कर रहे हैं?
What's he saying?
क्यों बात कर रहे हैं?
What is he saying? Would you tell me? Will you talk to me?
He says he doesn't want to give any reasons, but he doesn't wish to have his countrywomen photographed.
Well, just a minute. Just a minute. Who are you?
अच्छा आप अपने काम पे जाइए. नहीं आप ऐसे काम में गलत बात नहीं लगाइए. बिल्कुल गलत बात.
What's he saying,
He thinks you're calling him names.
I'm not calling him anything.
आपको समझ नहीं आएगा. कोई बेइज्जती की बात नहीं है. I'm afraid I'm getting the rough end of it. He thinks I shouldn't be cooperating. He thinks that you've come here to find out how poor and illiterate the Indians are. He says they won't speak and they won't cooperate anymore, and they don't wish foreigners to come and
As the crowd closed in, Fraser withdrew.
Thanks all.
Goodbye all. Thank you very much.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for your
Take
kind
care.
comments.
Well done, Hugh.
Well done, Hugh. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.